Welcome to ASA Central Line, the official podcast series of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, edited by Dr. Adam Stryker.
Hello and welcome to the Central Line podcast. I'm your guest host, Dr. Zach Deutch, and I have with me today a person known well to almost everyone in the ASA and outside the ASA in the medical community, Dr. Steve Shafer. He's going to discuss the always pertinent topic of hospital accreditation, which will also be covered exclusively and extensively in December's ASA Monitor. This is a very hot button topic that many of us have very strong feelings about. So I think this is going to be a very good podcast based on not only the subject matter, but our interviewee. Welcome, Dr. Shafer. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. And I really appreciate, you're making this podcast, this whole series, not this particular one, but this whole series, something that readers look forward to.
Well, thank you. And hopefully we'll continue to uphold that high standard today. Now, you've been on this show several times, and you're well known as the outgoing editor-in-chief of the ASA Monitor. Talk to me about your transition out of that role and into your next phase of life. Will you miss being the editor-in-chief? Is there anything that you really want listeners, readers, ASA members to know about what you took away from that role? And what do you see as your legacy?
Well, it's a complex question. I'll try to take it a bit at a time. I'm definitely going to miss it. I've enjoyed working with the editors. The ASA has put together an amazing staff. I'm going to miss that enormously. Our Walters Kluwer colleagues have brought a huge amount to the journal. I'm going to miss that. Zach, I'm going to miss you. I'm counting on your not becoming a stranger next year. As I've told you, we have a beautiful 14-acre farm in Port Angeles, Washington. By the way, Zach, while I have you on this podcast here, or maybe we have each other on this podcast, I just wanted to give a shout out because you introduced the term refereed. As you know, the ASA Monitor is not peer-reviewed, but the question is, how should we describe it to various individuals or a promotions committee who might consider our editors or our authors? And you pointed out that everything in the Monitor is refereed. And so, Zach, that was a great observation, and we've stayed with that. As far as my legacy, I have no idea. My feeling about legacies is they're best defined by others looking in the rearview mirror. So it's not my role to say whether there's a legacy or not.
Okay, I'll let you off easy with that one. And I don't want this to be too much of a fanboy thing, but as you know, myself, and I think I can speak for the rest of the editors and the readers, have greatly enjoyed working with you, and your contributions to this publication and to our specialty as a whole, our profession, have been enormous. And I'm just going to say that, and those who know me know that I don't give up praise that lightly. So I just wanted to get that on record, and hopefully everyone who's listening understands that.
I appreciate that, Zach, very much. And you're really kind, but I just want to point out it's a team sport working on the ASA Monitor. And we're sort of mutual fanboys here because I feel the same way about you.
Well, that's nice. And one day I will make it out to Port Angeles. You really make a good, strong case for a nice, peaceful, bucolic setting away from the hurly-burly of modern life. And that seems very attractive to me many times. So I appreciate that invitation. Let us move on to the meat of the topic, the hospital accreditation, which I know is a special passion of yours, which when we think of that here in this country, the first thing that comes to mind is the Joint Commission. But this is not the only option. Talk to us about other accreditation agencies and other options that facilities can engage apart from the Joint Commission, and where does their authority come from? And to touch on one in particular, which is, I think, probably the highest profile option to Joint Commission, is DNV, Der Norsk Veritas. Does that have a different approach to the accreditation process?
Yes. DNV, which stands for Det Norsk Veritas, which means the Norwegian truth. So not surprisingly, this is a Norwegian company. And they've been around for over 100 years and do all kinds of surveys, accreditation. They started off, I believe, as a marine accreditation, where they would look at ships and verify that they were seaworthy and certify them for insurance companies and things like this. So they are a different approach in that they really emphasize surveying hospitals for compliance with hospital policy. What they want to see is that hospitals have policies for the various aspects of healthcare and that the hospital is following those policies. Now, having said that, Medicare and Medicaid services do have a certain criteria to participate in Medicare and Medicaid services, and it's called COP. And DNV has to uphold those because that's what they are accredited to do by CMS. They're the people who grant authority to say you're an accrediting agency or you're not. So they have to follow the same guidelines as other accrediting agencies, of which the primary one, of course, is Joint Commission. But they've tried to really individualize it and not tried to be too prescriptive or intransigent. If places can make a good argument for why they are engaged in practicing medicine in a certain way.
Okay, so just to clarify for me, Steve, and for listeners, my understanding was that one of the primary drivers behind accreditation was, since they have that deeming authority by CMS, that you say you want to pass muster with the accrediting body because otherwise you risk a survey or a review done directly by the federal government through HHS and CMS. Is that a correct statement and assumption?
It's close, yes. First off, you've used the word deeming correctly. I had to look it up because it's just not part of my lexicon. And deeming is almost exclusively used to describe the Joint Commission and DNV as deeming authorities so designated by CMS. So, yes, if you fail accreditation, first off, you get a warning. They don't drop the hammer immediately. But what is at risk is the flow of funds from CMS to your organization. So there is an enormous financial penalty that is potentially in the cards. You're given multiple chances to pass, and they aren't trying to fail you. They really want you to pass. But that is at stake. Now, does CMS actually come out and do accreditations themselves? I heard reports of this, but I don't actually know anybody who has experienced that. So I think most places work with Joint Commission, or more recently, and by more recently, I mean the last 2 decades, with DNV to get through the accreditation process. And I will also mention, I've learned this only in the last few days, is that some states do accreditation as well. Here in Port Angeles, Washington, where I live, the state of Washington actually comes in and they do the accreditation surveys, which are then accepted by CMS. So there are other state organizations that also provide accreditation that are, I should say, they are also deeming authorities.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, it's kind of like there's a fear and loathing, but I think it's in degrees, right? The lesser evils. And certainly my perception in working with peers, other medical professionals, and with hospital administrators is that the thing that's most feared is any governmental authority in terms of the potential lack of understanding coupled with heavy-handed reactive moves toward whatever they perceive to be a problem.
Yeah, I would share that fear as well.
Okay, so we've established that our big player here in this country is the Joint Commission, and it hasn't been a static thing. Like everything in healthcare, it has evolved. Talk to us about your perception of how this body has changed over the past decades.
Happy to. So I've been personally quite outraged for decades over bizarre, arbitrary, capricious citations that seem to have no basis in terms of evidence and in some ways are completely orthogonal to good patient care. So when I thought about doing the December issue, my initial thought was I want to put up all the ridiculous things that have happened over the years from the Joint Commission and say, this is unacceptable. How can we tolerate having these people who don't really understand what we do come in and tell us we have to do things in ways that we think are frankly dangerous? I sent a thing to the ASA community bulletin board saying, hey, tell me your horror stories about the Joint Commission. I was contacted by Bill Furman, one of our colleagues, who retired about a decade ago and spent 7 years working for the Joint Commission. And Bill really opened up a different perspective for me. He said, I've been on the hospital side of Joint Commission surveys for years. I have these same stories. And these stories may or may not be true. They may be exaggerations or urban legends, but the Joint Commission knows that people feel that it has not been responsive to healthcare needs and has just simply wanted to go through and be sure a bunch of boxes are checked, which might in fact compromise patient care. They don't care. They just want to do this. And Bill's point is that is not the case. He talked about what he has seen in the last 7 years working for the Joint Commission. And he encouraged me to reach out to the current Joint Commission C suite, which includes physicians who are involved in the Joint Commission who are hired from senior positions at major academic institutions. And particularly, he wanted me to talk to a woman named Liz Mort. And Dr. Mort used to be the chief quality officer at MGH. And she has spent a decade or more preparing MGH for Joint Commission surveys. And now she's at the Joint Commission and she's their chief medical officer. And he said, you need to understand that they are completely changing their model. They want a collaborative model. And the model where they come in and cite you for dumb stuff, that has not been the case for a long time. And they are completely revamping the process. He suggested to me, and I was skeptical at first, he said, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you talk to them. So I did.
Okay, and?
And what I found is that Bill is right. I have had about 4 or 5 calls with Dr. Mort over the last 2 months preparing the December issue. I've exchanged well over 100 emails, I think, with Dr. Mort and her colleagues at the Joint Commission. I invited them to contribute articles about the Joint Commission, which they did, and those are included in the Monitor. And they're talking about the perspective, about the change, and about moving in this direction of being collaborative and not being oppositional in approaching hospitals about the delivery of healthcare. Now, as I mentioned when I started, CMS sets the rules. It's the golden rule. They have the gold, they make the rules. But the deeming organizations, I've mentioned DNB, I have led to the Joint Commission, are taking an approach that say, we want to understand what you do. We want to be sure that you are following your own policies. There are things you have to do. You can't let anybody just walk in and give healthcare. For example, there's credentialing processes. Did physicians really graduate from medical school? This kind of thing. But when we talk about specifics of patient care delivery, we just want to know what you do and are you following your own policies? And we're really not all that interested in debating you about your policies as long as, they're kind of reasonable and you're paying attention to them.
Okay, that's interesting. We're going to come back to that. Let's not forget that. I want to make sure we touch on something that's important in terms of ASA members, something they hear about a lot, they may not understand, and your expertise is going to be valuable here. So I want you to talk about USP 797. Tell us what this is, how does it impact our work, and why should we care about it?
USP 797 was prepared by the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, which is it's not a governmental body, but it sort of acts like one. And the U.S. government refers to the U.S. Pharmacopoeia for guidance on a lot of things related to medications. USP 797 is specifically about medication compounding. Now, you might think that what we do in the operating room is not medication compounding. I mean, it's not like we're making up, powders of various steroids to be sold in supermarkets or something like that. But for a long time, 797 has been interpreted as applying to things like repackaging. And repackaging is considered taking something from the original container, like a little glass of vial that's in your Pyxis, and drawing it up into another container like a syringe. Well, taken to that extreme, USP 797 describes every drug that we give. It describes how we handle intravenous lines, because when we spike a bag, we are compromising the original container, which is the bag that the saline comes in. So USP 797 has been applied to anesthesia for years. And what I discovered is a lot of my own discomfort, frustration, etc., with Joint Commission actually relates to the fact that they are just simply following the dictates of USP 797, which for probably at least a decade or so was prepared with no input from physicians whatsoever. I'm happy to say that that's changed.
Okay. So any pitfalls, problems with this as it stands right now in terms of its actual impact on perioperative care and logistics?
Yes, it is improved immensely. And I think for that, we have to thank a woman named Elizabeth Rebello. In the process of writing up the editorial on this, I went to the people who are on the committee that reviewed the most recent USP 797 document published in 2023, certain that I would find no physicians on that list. And I came to the name of Elizabeth Rebello, and it's Elizabeth Rebello, MD. So she's a physician. So I looked her up. Not only is she a physician, she's an anesthesiologist. So she understands where we're coming from. Not only is she an anesthesiologist, but she's written several papers that have appeared in the ASA Monitor. So there I just simply felt, a little demented that I didn't recall that from the get-go. But anyway, Dr. Rebello worked with the committee on 797 and is responsible for a number of consequential changes. The first one that's very obvious is that we were told at Stanford, and I think everyone was told this, that IVs had to be used within an hour of being spiked. If they weren't used within an hour of being spiked, they had to be tossed out because of the potential for contamination. Well, at Stanford, we were just told, we can't have spiked IV bags available in the anesthesia workroom because we're going to be tossing so many out unless they're used within the hour. And we were also told to label any IVs that we prepare in the operating room in advance so that we could toss them out in an hour. Obviously, this makes no sense. Why is it that an IV that hasn't been touched, other than being spiked, is contaminated in an hour, but if you attach it to a patient and let it run for 12 hours, that's perfectly fine? Is the patient somehow magically preventing the IV from becoming contaminated? It's just utterly illogical. So Elizabeth Rebello was able to change the most recent iteration of USP 797 to flat out say, we don't talk about IV spiking. We don't talk about spiking the bag. That's completely outside the scope of 797. Another regulation in 797 used to be that any medication had to be used within an hour of being drawn up. Otherwise, it was considered a contaminated medication. Well, I'm sure that a lot of people listening in here have taken care of patients in the OB suite. And, in labor and delivery at 2:00 in the morning, there's just going to be a stat C-section. And when you have a stat C-section, you're expected to go from standstill to 1,000 miles an hour in about 5 minutes. If you don't have your meds drawn up and are trying to frantically throw together all the meds that you might need for that C-section, as well as getting your IV ready, as well as getting your lines ready, your airway equipment, checking out your anesthesia machine, et cetera, and you've got 5 minutes before the baby comes in because there's ongoing neonatal hypoxia, you're just asking for further damage to the neonate. So Elizabeth Rebello was able to get the USP to say, no, it's not a 1 hour limitation. It's now a 4-hour limitation for meds that are being drawn up. It's not clear whether or not that is exactly correct. We have an article by Dr. Robert Campbell, who's an expert on USP 797. And Dr. Campbell believes, yes, the 4-hour limitation on meds drawn up still exists. However, others in that community seem to feel that that might be an overly strict interpretation. So there's still room for improvement. And the thing I think from our perspective as anesthesiologists is that the 4-hour limitation may in fact not apply. Again, why is what we are doing considered compounding at all? It's because we're moving something from one container, like a vial, to another container, like a syringe. Is that really repackaging something? I think of repackaging as something that happens in an Amazon warehouse and not something that I'm due when I'm preparing for my next case. So there's still a little bit of work that needs to be done in USP 797, but it is vastly improved because of Dr. Rebello's efforts, and she deserves everybody's thanks for making our lives easier, and I think making the lives of the Joint Commission easier too. They really don't want to show up and say, oh, drugs all go bad after 1 hour when there's truly no data that support that.
Okay, excellent summation. We're going to go back to a topic I said we'd come back to, which is policies, preparations, all the relevant administrative details that relate to Joint Commission surveys, visits. Give listeners your idea about how they can best prepare and handle this not particularly looked forward to occasion.
A couple thoughts. First, there are companies that offer pre-visit assessments. What I've been told by some people who have used these companies is that by and large, they make their money by basically scaring the hell out of everybody and coming through and being as picky and as arbitrary and as capricious as they can be. And I've been told that some of the things that people attribute to the Joint Commission are actually related instead to these review companies. And it's best to avoid them. The other thing I think to do is to go and engage the companies in advance. For example, the Joint Commission is launching something called Accreditation 360. And that refers to the 360 degrees of a compass and not to the 365 days in the year, which suggests you get 5 days in which you can do whatever the hell you want. So Accreditation 360 is looking all around for accreditation, but it's an entirely new program that they are rolling out to help healthcare organizations get ready for accreditation. So DNV and Joint Commission through specific programs are trying to help health organizations know what to do in advance. Also, there's a wonderful submission by Ashley Peterson, one of my Stanford colleagues, who has been very much involved in Joint Commission surveys. She's an anesthesiologist. And she has a whole list of things that you should think about as an anesthesiologist or an anesthesia department prior to a Joint Commission survey. I'll give you a simple example. She said, hospitals are large and complex mazes, and physicians know all the ways of getting from point A to point B very quickly. You don't take your surveyor from the operating room to the next place they want to inspect or survey by walking through the steam reprocessing plant or the hospital morgue or the sterile cleaning supply, even if there's a shortcut. Figure out your paths. Know how you're going to walk the surveyors from place to place through your maze. Some hallways are nice, large, clean, and there are no beds and x-ray machines in the edges of the hallway, and other hallways are really, they're cluttered. Figure out your paths. That kind of simple suggestion, there's a lot of that in this issue of the ASA Monitor.
Okay, and we're going to come back to that as well. I want to get a little more background on that, but I want to make a comment. I don't like to get on the soapbox here, but I think that I'd be interested, and you can give your feedback on this as well. We talked about, these regulatory agencies. Basically, one of the big things, the real hot button topics is, are you following your own policies? And so when I was a perioperative medical director, I made a mandate. I said, we will have no policy that is longer than a page. Everything will be extremely terse, will be extremely clear, and will be extremely broad. Such that, for example, if we had things like, we will only do children over the age of 2. However, with the consent of the nursing director, perioperative medical director, and or his or her designate, and the proceduralist, exceptions can be made. So automatically you have a very brief policy that covers you for everything, and basically nothing you can do can be in violation. It's easy to follow, it makes sense, and it gives the piece of paper that they want without being restrictive. So I thought that was a very important point, and it was one that our organization was not good at, but we subsequently became better at. So I just wanted to throw that out there as my own little personal take on this, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about that.
Well, what I think about that is I should have asked you for an article. No, that's exactly right. You want your policies not to be long tomes that people are afraid to drop the notebook because it might actually crack the granite. You want the policy to be something that people can read, can look at, and that actually makes sense. Ideally, you would like a policy that somebody could say, yes, I think this is the policy simply because it's logical. Even if they haven't read it, they say, yeah, I think this is what we do because it is what they know they do, and it's what they should be doing. As anesthesiologists, we are not looking for ease in our work. We are not looking for shortcuts that compromise patient safety. We are really interested in doing a good job caring for our patients. Our policies that apply to anesthesia should line up with what we know from decades of experience and about a decade of training as well. This is how you take care of patients well. So, Zach, you're exactly right. Policies should be simple, easy to understand, and frankly, they should be the kind of thing you'd say, well, if I was making the policy, here's what I would say.
Okay, great. I appreciate that backup. And, of course, like everybody, I'm looking for that validation. You gave it to me. I'm very grateful. Let's go back to talk about, you mentioned one or two specific articles. Talk to us about your other takeaways from this issue, stuff that you think readers will particularly enjoy, stuff that you thought was particularly insightful, and just kind of share that with us if you would.
Well, I think what readers will like are first person accounts. I already mentioned Ashley Peterson. She writes in first person about her experience. Liz Mort writes in first person. And one of the things she addresses is, why did I leave MGH? I'm a full professor. And by the way, she still cares for patients at MGH. She has not resigned from the clinical staff. But why did I leave MGH to go to the Joint Commission? And what comes out of these first person accounts in this issue is people talk about passion. Liz Mort is passionate about patient safety. She, frankly, sees what we've all seen in the past because she's lived it. That's her lived experience. And she joined the Joint Commission when they reached out and they said, we want to change things. We want to be the patient safety advocates in healthcare. And she said, wow, what an opportunity. So I think what people will find interesting is that this is not an article by or about faceless bureaucrats and faceless administrators. This is a whole series of articles, by and large, written in first person, including Bill Furman's article, where he talks about his experiences as a surveyor, and my article where I talk about how I made a complete 180-degree switch from initially thinking the Joint Commission was kind of a negative force to having an enormous amount of respect for where they're going and believing that, in fact, we are collaborators in the future.
Okay, wonderful. I think it's going to be a good read. I look forward to seeing it myself, and we encourage all our readers and listeners to indulge themselves and to send feedback as well. Steve, it's been great having you. It's been great working with you. I think this is a great send-off for you, and I'm hoping, and I think I speak for all the ASA members, that you'll continue to be involved visibly and intellectually in our specialty, despite going off to your farm in Port Angeles.
Zach, that's really appreciated. It's been a lot of work. But it's been a labor of love. And I just want to end with a shout out to the ASA. One thing I've learned over the last 6 years, the ASA really has our back. People will always often say, oh, I'm upset with the ASA for this reason. I'm upset with the ASA for this reason. The ASA is doing too much in this and not enough here. The ASA is not reflecting my priorities in X, Y, or Z. Everybody can find something to criticize about anything. But what I can tell you from my 6 years is the ASA really has our back. And I think that we live in a world where people are a little too quick to criticize and a little bit too slow to realize how much the organizations that we are aligned with have our back. So the message I want to tell people is, it's fine to disagree with the ASA. They welcome disagreement, but realize that it's an amazing organization that really has the back of anesthesiologists. For example, I talked about USP 797. I see ASA fingerprints all over the appointment of Dr. Rebello, all over trying to help anesthesiologists navigate this. And these are all things that go on in the background. We don't even know what happens. But the ASA has our back. And that's kind of my final message.
Again, Steve, thank you so much. Appreciate your knowledge and wisdom as always. And I appreciate our listeners tuning in to the Central Line podcast. For more information, you can always go to asamonitor.org, and we look forward to seeing you again for our next installment. Take care.
Every day gives you new reasons to say yes to ASA. Explore all member benefits, renew now, or join today at asahq.org/benefits. Subscribe to Central Line today, wherever you get your podcasts, or visit asahq.org/podcasts for more.